Hello, welcome to For F1's Sake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula One fans chatting absolute nonsense and offering our ridiculously biased opinions. So, this week I thought, Brad, it might be useful to kind of go through, each team and kind of what they're needing to do for the next test in Bahrain, which is coming up next week, a week before the first Grand Prix of the season.
Well, I think it would be completely different to Barcelona.
Yeah, it should be. I think the cars that are going to arrive in Bahrain are going to be, night and day from what we saw in Barcelona. In some teams, I think. Other teams, you've got the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes that had a pretty solid test last week, and so I think their concepts are fairly nailed down.
I totally agree. Well, the way we're going to do this, right? So we're going to run through this with the teams who have got the most number of laps. So that's our order right now.
Yeah. So
that's how we're going to break this down.
That starts off with Ferrari. So Ferrari did 439 laps last week in testing.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. They had a pretty solid test, to be fair. In terms of what I would say they need to focus on next week, more of the same, really, isn't it? It's more data collection. I mean, their concept seems fairly good. I think
it works well because they've just got mileage, haven't they? They prioritise mileage, and it's worked perfectly for them.
Yeah, maybe one thing for Ferrari to focus on next week would be, outright pace. I think we need to kind of see a showing of ultimate pace from Ferrari, because they were a team, typically Ferrari in testing, they kind of turn up to these testing events and do the fastest lap, with the eye of pleasing the Tifosi more than anything.
I think it worked well what they were doing. Yeah, we haven't seen the full pace, but again, I don't know if we're going to see the full pace from any of the teams until the first race anyway.
No, there's still going to be some sandbagging. I think Mercedes, of all the teams, are going to be the most likely to be sandbagging in Bahrain again. But I think this. I think the number of the laps led. I keep saying laps led. The number of laps completed, I think, shows true form more than lap times. I think in testing, it shows who's got the most data, who's got the most nailed down car concept, who's got the most solid package, really. So I think as a summary for Ferrari, it's more of the same, and I think it's going to be pretty similar with Mercedes, to be honest. However, I don't know whether you've seen much about this this week post testing. Was the porpoising?
No, I've seen a little bit about this, but not too much.
So essentially, what's been happening is, because the way that these cars are produced their downforce now, with it all being on the floor rather than the top surface of the car, the cars are being pulled closer to the ground due to the ground effect on the underfloor diffuser. And so as they get closer and closer to the ground, the higher the speed is. The diffuser then gets to a point where it's so close to the ground that it stalls and there's no air running through it. So it immediately pops back up because it loses all of its downforce, and then it repeats the cycle again. So the car's going up and down, up and down. And if you look at the Ferrari...
Is that going to be an issue then for the season?
Potentially, yeah. So, if you look at the Ferrari, there's a couple of videos on F1's Twitter page showing Carlos Sainz bumping up and down the test straight in Barcelona, if you find it. But it's quite violent. And one of the teams that suffered the least from this was McLaren. They seem to have anticipated this and produced a solution. But I think a lot of teams, Ferrari and Mercedes included, need to kind of figure out a solution to this. McLaren have managed
we'll get into this with McLaren because it's actually a really interesting situation that they're in. I think we'll get to that because there's a lot to say about McLaren, actually.
Yeah. So in terms of Mercedes and Ferrari, I think that's definitely going to be an aspect that they need to focus on, which might end up hurting their total pace by the time the first race of the season in Bahrain comes around.
But that's what testing's for. That's what they're there to do because they both got really good mileage on the cars. I think they're the top two, aren't they? So they shouldn't have too much to worry about. I think they'll be able to figure this out pretty quickly, especially Mercedes. You know what they're like.
Well, yeah,
5-minute job, won't it?
They're two of the three teams with by far and away the most resources, aren't they? If anybody's going to be able to nail this down, it's going to be those two.
You'd think so.
Yeah. So then, obviously, moving on, McLaren is next with 367 laps led. And so, like I was mentioning, McLaren have managed to kind of create an intuitive solution to this that quite frankly, no other team has really managed to achieve to the same effect. So they're essentially creating a vortex off the front of their diffuser, on the front of the floor, sorry. Right. It's quite a strong vortex that's helping to seal the floor and stop this stalling happening. So McLaren actually don't need to focus too much attention on that, which is a great point, because
save them a lot of time.
It will. They can focus on performance gains now. I think that's what I'm expecting to see from McLaren in Bahrain, is maybe, again, like Ferrari, putting some pace down. They got good mileage.
Well, I've done a little bit of researching, and I came up with a few of the interviews that we had from Lando and Ricciardo. Lando didn't seem like he was completely convinced yet, but Ricciardo, the first thing he said when he was asked is that he said this car is absolutely perfect. He loves it. So
really?
That's obviously a big piece of news for McLaren. It's really ensuring, but we don't know if that's a fast car or not yet. They're not really showing. They haven't really shown us the pace, so maybe they're hiding that. I don't know. It looks a bit masked.
Yeah, well, do you remember what did Lando say on the first day of testing when he topped the timesheets? He was annoyed that he'd topped the timing sheets, because he said, well, everybody's going to think we're rapid now, and we're going to have high expectations placed on us. And I think it's interesting to hear drivers speak like that, because everybody, the name of the game in testing is sandbagging, isn't it? You don't want to give your cars
sandbagging,
away.
But I think it's really with Mercedes for the last, well, actually saying that last year they didn't really have a drivable car for a while, but they don't really care. I think the top teams at the moment don't seem to really care that they've got the fastest car in their testing. I mean, why would you? If you've got a fast car, show it.
Yeah, but this is it. This is one thing that I kind of thought was, if you have got the fastest car, you've got the fastest car. People don't necessarily know whether it is or it isn't. You might top the timing sheets.
That's the whole point in testing.
Yeah, you might top the timing sheets.
I get trying to keep your cars close to your chest and surprising people on race day, but what if you don't surprise people and they're still going to surprise you? Like, you don't know. There's a lot going into this.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the trends over the past few years of testing, more often than not, with the exception of Ferrari in a couple of years, whoever tops the timing sheets in testing tends to edge out on the first race of the season. Yeah, so I don't know how effective that sandbagging, particularly is. But
I think you're going to love me for saying it, but I think McLaren might actually have the fastest car. I don't think they've shown it yet.
I hope so. I really hope so.
A really strong feeling that's going to be right at the top. When we see it next week, I think we are going to see something special from McLaren.
Which is weird, because I remember when they launched the car, it looked really vanilla. I remember saying this. There was just, with the Mercedes and the Red Bull, when we eventually saw them on track, they had so many little intricate details that the McLaren just didn't seem to have.
The side pods and things.
Yeah, well, the side pods, the Mercedes have got that floor detailing, with the kind of the waveform pattern on the edge of the floor.
That's true.
There's loads of these little details that seem, in effect, to not make too much performance difference in respect to McLaren, which basically looks like not too dissimilar, I would say. Obviously, the side pods are different, but not too dissimilar from the launch car. But it just seems to work. It seems to be very cleverly packaged and very cleverly constructed.
I think if Ricciardo says that he likes this McLaren, then I've got really high hopes, because he was struggling last year and he didn't like the car the whole year, did he? So
that's it. Yeah, it didn't fit his driving style, I think he said, didn't he? There was multiple instances after races saying that he just didn't gel with the way that the car needed to be driven, which is something that Lando seemed to be able to pick up fairly quickly. But I think that's just due to the fact that Lando hasn't had the experience in older F1 cars. He's not used to how they used to drive, whereas Ricciardo has had that experience.
But you'd think it'd be the other way around, with Ricciardo being able to adapt better than what Lando would be able to. But I think Lando actually has adapted to all of these cars really well. He's gone into them really quickly and just driven them like it's his everyday job, like it should be.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lando's come through the junior categories fairly quickly, hasn't he? So he's had no more than 2, maybe 3 years max in a certain category before he moves on to the next one. So he's had to adapt his driving style fairly quickly, whereas Ricciardo's been in F1 for a number of years now. So he's kind of almost settled into it, I think, into a style of driving. But even so, according to what people are saying with these new cars, with the fact that the tyre profiles are so much lower, they react so much faster. So as you turn the car into a corner, it snaps into that corner much quicker. And so they've been saying already, Verstappen and Leclerc have completely changed their driving styles. Verstappen used to be a very much a turn and point and shoot essentially, but he's been a lot smoother according to on-track reporting that I've heard this week.
Well, it depends if he can still get his aggressive line. I think we're going into Red Bull now anyway. I mean, 358 laps, again, not bad. They prioritised the mileage a little bit, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more from the Red Bull, a bit more pace, but
I
maybe
think
they're doing a similar thing.
I think with the Red Bull, I think it's very all fur coat and potentially no knickers. Obviously, it's a very quick car, but I think there's some gremlins there that are being hidden. Your favourite word.
Some what? Some gremlins?
Some gremlins that are being hidden. There's some. Yeah. I think that car is the philosophy of it is good. I think there's some issues that they need to sort out. I mean, they've not added floor wings yet, which a lot of the other teams have added, which are allowed in the regulations. It's something that I imagine that they will bring to Bahrain.
Yeah, definitely. Of course they will. I mean, if they can't miss out on that, because it could be. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's going to be big time, but it's going to be a bit.
I mean, there's a lot of talk of the Red Bull. What's it called? It used to be called the monkey seat, didn't it? Or the beam wing that sits underneath the rear wing at the minute. Red Bull seems to have a really radical concept for that, which a lot of people are saying, it seems counterintuitive by the fact that it robs downforce from the lower part of the rear wing, but in actual fact, it aids to clean up the air and the rear wing works more efficiently. So there's
that's
little
point.
Yeah, it's little things like that I think are really clever. I mean, Adrian Newey knows what he's doing. I imagine most of these niggles will sort themselves out by the time we get to Bahrain.
I think I'm going to have to make a bit of a montage of you saying Adrian Newey, because it's just going to be you at the end of the season. Adrian Newey. Well, if you want to marry him, then just get the ring out.
He's the most prolific aerodynamicist in F1 at the minute. However,
I find it. About?
I'm not going to say. You know who I'm talking about.
Adrian Newey.
Moving on. We'll move on then to Williams. Fairly quiet test for Williams. I think that's what they needed, really, after the last 5 years of uncertainty.
Yeah, well, it's been chopping and changing every year for Williams, and finally they're settling a little bit. But yeah, it's good. I think it's good signs from Williams. It's nice to see that Albon just came into this team and really settled down like it was nothing. So happy for him. But I think the car was actually a little bit snappy. I don't know if you agree. In watching it back, it looked like there was a little bit of snap in the low speed areas of Barcelona.
I didn't see. I didn't see much coverage of the Williams, to be honest. They were fairly quiet throughout testing.
Yeah, there was a little bit. There wasn't much. I mean, obviously they're not going to be recording a Williams car because it's just previous years just knew what it's going to be like. But yeah, you could see that they were struggling a little bit with the snap of the car, which I think is similar for other teams as well. But yeah, it was weird to see. But I think they can control it. It's not bad. They've got another testing.
I mean, it is to be expected with such a huge change to the regulations, I suppose. I imagine there'll be things like that for most teams that they'll be struggling with. But like you said, it's good. I think they've come out and said they were quite pleased with the fact that Alex Albon has been so crucial to helping the development of the car. I mean, he's obviously got the experience of helping to develop last year's Red Bull, but I don't think they were expecting as to how useful he was going to be on that side of things. On top of being a fairly solid driver, I think that's a really good point for Williams this year. I think they lost out on George Russell last year. Obviously, that was to be expected, but I think that Alex Albon is a fairly well suited replacement in that team now. I think that team's on the way up. He's a decent driver. We know he's good enough for Red Bull's program. They obviously want to keep some attachments to him. So I think that's
I like Albon a lot, actually. I think he's a really good driver. I mean, we didn't see the best of him at Red Bull. We saw glimpses of him being really good, but yeah, I'm just kind of hoping that if this Williams does happen to be a midfield team, that he's not going to be not as aggressive. But I want to see like more calculated moves from him, because I think he was testing the top drivers, and it's never going to work the way that Max is used to doing. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he did have the upper hand on Lewis Hamilton a couple of times.
No, he didn't.
He did.
No.
As much as you don't want to admit it, he did. Otherwise, Lewis Hamilton wouldn't have been reprimanded.
He did. I think, yeah, but Lewis doesn't really care, does he? He just gets the pace going again. Just the 10-second penalties don't exist for him.
yeah, it's bizarre. Why did he not just bring that pace out in the first place?
How was Albon twice? Was it in 2 years? I think it was twice in 2 years.
It was twice in 1 year.
Twice in 1 year.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I mean, I think one of them was definitely Lewis being a bit of a dick, but the second one was definitely Albon. I think the one was it the Dutch one? I can't remember. I mean, nobody goes for an overtake on that corner, and Albon's like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm going to send it."
I think there was one at the Austrian Grand Prix, wasn't there? The Red Bull.
Yeah, it's Austrian. That's right. Yeah, it's Red Bull Ring. Yeah, I call that the Dutch one because there's just so many Dutch fans there all the time.
And wasn't the other one at Brazil? I'm sure it was at Interlagos.
Yeah, it was Brazil.
Yeah,
the Brazilian one's the one that I think was actually Lewis, but Jesus, there's some loud bike outside. Yeah, I think the second of the well, I don't even know which one came first. But the Austrian one, I think, was Albon's fault.
Mm-hmm. Begs to differ on that one.
Anyway. I don't even know why we're talking about this anyway.
Yeah, moving on. So next was AlphaTauri. Again, another fairly quiet test. I think they are pretty much where they expected to be be honest. I mean, 308 laps completed. 50 shy of their parent team, Red Bull. I don't know what much more to say on AlphaTauri, to be honest.
They split the laps fairly evenly between Yuki and Pierre as well, but I think they had the only crash, didn't they? I think Pierre was the only one that slammed the wall.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I'm pretty certain that Pierre was the only one, and that kind of affected Yuki's running for that day. So I don't think they got exactly what they wanted on that day. I don't know if that was in the wet or when it was, but I'm sure you'll be happy that it was Pierre that crashed of all people.
Doesn't mean anything unless it's on a racing Sunday, or to be fair, on a sprint race, because I think the points have increased for sprint races this year. But we'll talk about that at a later point.
Yeah.
But that will be very interesting to see what dynamic that adds to the racing weekend. I'm interested to see how that affects it all.
Yeah, it could be interesting. More points is big, so
yeah, absolutely. So I think for AlphaTauri as a whole, it's just more laps, honing the performance. I mean, no crashes would be useful, but yeah, it's a solid.
Yeah, no crashes.
A solid weekend. Next on the list was Aston Martin with 296 laps led, and they did have some issues. We talked about this on the podcast last week. They had an oil leak which led to an engine fire, which eroded quite a lot of the time for testing for both drivers. I think Aston, I don't know whether they're taking on more than they can deal with. Maybe. I don't know whether they've bitten off more they can chew.
It was another one that I think was a bit snappy again. We saw more from the Aston, not loads, but again, this is quite a snappy car, and the low speed areas again was horrible for Aston. But yeah, they did have their issues, but I think Stroll Jr. was, I don't know if he had the best running, but Seb looked like he was fairly happy with the car.
Yeah, I think the car's concept is good. I think it's more the fact of, there's almost no components carried over on these cars from last year. They're so radically different. And they were saying that, even the nuts and bolts that hold the body panels on, are different. And so there's just so much complexity in them now that I think that they're, like I said, maybe they've bitten off a little bit more than they can chew in terms of the car concept that they're trying to push.
You could almost see it coming, couldn't you?
Yeah, so I think it's reliability is going to be the main factor for Aston Martin this season. Not just in testing. I think it's going to be all season, because they're the only. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're the only Mercedes power unit team that have opted for the louvered vents on the side pods.
Yeah, no, they are. It's the only one. I mean, I'm surprised they even managed to get clearing on that, to be honest. I'm not sure why they went for that. But
interesting that they've decided to do that, but none of the other Mercedes customer teams have done that, which makes you think, well, is that the best solution? I mean, the fact that they've had an oil leak and an engine fire would dictate not.
I think I think what you're saying is probably completely right. They've bitten off more than they can chew, but I think there's more to be seen from Aston. If they come into Bahrain and really sort this car out, then it might be a good runner. But I don't see it being a top runner.
I mean, there's even talks I was reading today that they're entering discussions onto entering the power unit production for 2026. It's just like there's too much. There's too much going on at Aston Martin. They're building a new factory, a new wind tunnel, a new simulator, a new car. Now they want to enter the power unit division. It just seems a bit. I mean, take it one step at a time. I think. I mean, if they can do it, fair play to them, and if they can be competitive, then more power to them. I just think that you need to kind of hone in your focus on what it is you want to achieve in the short term. And
yeah, well, let's give them a message now, because they're probably going to be listening. All these people, the Aston Martin, all these great people that work for Aston.
Lawrence Stroll and Mike Crack know what you're doing listeners.
Here. Yeah, it's not working. All right, Mike Crack, what a name, by the way. Yeah, they need to sort this out. Sort your car out. Stop being so forward with everything. Focus on your driving. That's it. Good night.
So next was Alpine, another I would borderline disastrous test. I wouldn't say it's disastrous because the next two teams I would say were probably disastrous, but not the best. I mean, 266 laps.
It's average.
It's okay. It's not too far off the front of the pack.
It's like half, isn't it? Half of the top, but it's kind of where you expected them to be. But they didn't even get DRS working. So
exactly, they were plagued by issues the whole test, and I think again reliability is going to be a major factor. I mean, they're the only team on the grid with a Renault power unit. They've not got any. Look at Mercedes, look at Ferrari. Even Red Bull. They've got sister teams that are gathering data on that engine lap after lap. So whether Mercedes have only completed 393 laps, plus McLaren's 367, Williams 347, Aston Martin's 296. They've got well over 1,500 laps there that they can gather data from on that power unit, whereas Alpine and Renault have got 266. There's so much less data.
I wouldn't surprise me if they've forgotten DRS actually exists. They've just forgotten to put on this car. I mean, it was a horrible testing for them. I think. Yeah. I hate Alpine now. I've lost my love for any Renault or Alpine car.
It is a shame because I love Fernando Alonso. I think he's such a good driver. I know he's a little bit past it now, but I don't know. He's
kind of want him to do good at the same time. But
yeah, I'd love to see him on the podium again this year.
Time's gone. His time is over. I think he came back into a team that were kind of struggling a little bit anyway. So
I know. Could you imagine if he'd have stayed at McLaren? Where would he be now? He could be a title contender.
Imagine Alonso coming back as a title contender. He's like, 500 years old now?
So, yeah, I think Alpine's main focus again is going to be sorting out these stupid. I mean, to not even get DRS working on the first test is worrying for such for essentially a manufacturer. That is worrying.
One of the biggest parts of racing right now. Unfortunately, we don't even like DRS, but you need it. You 100% are going to need it especially on Bahrain. There's a few straights on that track. We've got 3 DRS zones. You don't even know if your DRS works yet.
I mean, that's going to be. So we'll put down Alpine's main focus is to sort DRS.
Yes, sort DRS. Maybe get. No, that's it. I'm literally going to put this just DRS.
Because if they've not got the DRS, doesn't matter if they're reliable or not. They'll still be at the back of the grid, so they may as well retire the car anyway.
Well, funnily enough, they weren't actually the slowest at testing, even though they didn't get many laps in and no DRS laps.
Yeah,
they were still quicker than Alfa and Haas.
Yeah, which
is really concerning for these two teams.
Which moves us on to the disasters of the testing week. So first of which being Alfa Romeo, which I was surprised by, to be honest, because there was a lot of talk from the spy shots that this Alfa Romeo looked like a pretty solid concept from aerodynamicists that I'd watched online. It looked like this Alfa Romeo could be a pretty good car.
But yeah, well, they didn't have major issues. That's the thing. The weird thing about this car is they didn't have major issues where they went, that has to change and this has to change. It wasn't like that. It's just a slow car and it wasn't working.
Yeah, it's like the concept is fundamentally flawed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what Adrian Newey thinks of it.
What, being the technical genius that he is?
Yeah, He's just a god, isn't he? But it just wasn't working. Valtteri didn't get many laps in either, which is a big shame because I kind of wanted to see what he could do in this car.
I think Valtteri had the least number of laps out of any driver
Less than 50,
on test week. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
It's embarrassing for him. I mean, yeah, proper embarrassment. I mean, this is one of the most experienced drivers now.
Exactly. I mean, he went from being top of the test last year to being the driver with the least number of laps this year.
Yeah, what a shame.
It is a shame. I think. I mean, I'd like to see Alfa Romeo doing well. They just seem to be plagued with issues. I mean, they got the concept wrong from 2017 onwards with Sauber. I think that car was inherently slow, and no matter how much they developed it throughout the course of the previous regulations, it was never going to be a middle team. And worryingly, it looks like they may have done the same again. It's a similar concept to the Aston Martin. I just don't know whether that concept is going to work this year.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I mean, I'm going to try and say his name here. Guan Yu Zhou.
There we go. We've got it. I think we've got that
one. He did some good laps, yeah. But I'm more worried about what we're going to do at Bottas. Do you think he's going to be the number one driver? I mean, surely he has to be.
Yeah, he has to be. He's got the experience, hasn't he? I mean, Christ, he's challenging. Revenge?
I think this is revenge for that one woman in Abu Dhabi when we were there that kept really aggressively loving Bottas. It was so frustrating because every time I said, "Go on, Lewis, get in there, Lewis," she would turn around. She'd just have this massive frown on her face, and this is what's happened now. She's probably supporting Alfa Romeo because of Bottas, and it's not worked.
Yeah, it's her fault. So
it has to be.
Alfa Romeo's challenge for Bahrain is to eliminate Bottas's fans.
Eliminate his fans, but also get a car that can put some mileage down. At least they've got DRS, but they just need more from this car. It wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see if they come up, with a different concept for Bahrain. Who knows? They could have a B spec car. There's talk that Mercedes might be turning up with a B spec car.
Yeah, maybe.
But having said that, with the prescriptive regulations in terms of the budget caps, I just don't see how that's feasible. When they brought that B spec car, was it 2017 when the regulations came in? They brought a B spec car to the second week of testing. But they were spending it was $500 million they had for that season. So they've got a quarter of that. I don't see that happening. I'd be very surprised. I think it's you choose your concept and that's it. And if it doesn't work, you just have to focus on next year.
Do driver contracts actually affect on the budget? No, I guess they don't.
Surely not, because Red Bull have spent half their entire budget on Max Verstappen's new contract.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, because they've signed him on until 26 or whatever it was.
28.
28.
Yeah, the longest F1 contract ever, I think it is.
Yeah, well, Max kind of does look like a Red Bull can at this point. He's been there for so long. It feels like when did Max actually join Formula 1? Was it 2018?
2016.
2016 he's been in Red Bull.
I'm sure it's 2016. Correct us if we're wrong, but I'm almost certain it's 2016. And he did he win his first race? He was on the podium in his first race. I can't remember. He did
something like that. They had a great performance when he first joined.
Yeah,
I mean, don't say people for correcting us, because we would have paragraphs of shite. I mean, we're probably getting a lot wrong here, but yeah, I think we're straying away from the worst two teams.
Yeah. So moving back then, we'll digress to Haas.
Oh, here we go.
I mean,
our content creators.
Yeah, literally all the content surrounding F1 is coming from Haas. I mean, they always say any PR is good PR. However, this may be an exception. This may be an exception. So obviously, if you've not already heard the news, you must be living under a rock. But Nikita Mazepin has been sacked. Couple that with the fact that Haas completed the least number of laps throughout testing. They had to change the livery halfway through due to circumstances you'll all be aware of. It's been a nightmare week for Haas. Gunter Stein's had a lot to deal with. A nightmare. But it's not gone well for Haas. Let's be honest.
I'm not going to cry for them. I think this is what you get. I mean, I'm not going to get controversial on it at all, but we can see this coming. I mean, Mazepin's obviously upset. I don't know if you want to read that message that's on screen now.
Well, yeah, but... I mean, the word from Mazepin on his Twitter account was, he's written, as I recite it verbatim. Dear fans and followers, I am very disappointed to hear that my F1 contract has been terminated. While I understand the difficulties, the ruling from the FIA, plus my ongoing willingness to accept the conditions proposed in order to continue, were completely ignored and no process was followed in this unilateral step. To those who have tried to understand, my eternal thanks. I have treasured my time in F1 and genuinely hope we can all be together again in better times. I'll have more to say in the coming days. I think it was to be expected. I don't think anybody was expecting Mazepin to stay on once Uralkali was dropped.
He must have known. There's no way he didn't know. Like, immediately you would go, yeah, that's my time done.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, he's never been there on merit. Nobody's ever come out and said, Nikita Mazepin should be in F1 because he's one of the best 20 drivers on the planet. I mean, Christ, Martin Brundle was slating him throughout the season, which is so unlike him. He's normally very pro any driver.
I mean, he's been slated by everyone and their dogs. But it's the what annoys me about this is that he's definitely not put this message out himself, which is kind of frustrating. I mean, he's got to be one of the most Russian people I've known on TV in a while, and he's put unilateral step. I don't even know what the fuck that means, and I'm English. So there's no way he knows what that means. So he's just gotten a ghostwriter to put this out, and he's clearly just crying in bed. You get what you deserve. Moving on from him.
Yeah, I think, it was to be expected. What will be interesting now is what Haas does. Apparently, Gene Haas has the funds to be able to kind of front that 20% gap that has been left by the Uralkali sponsorship. It's whether they bring on a new sponsorship, and we might even see a completely different livery for Haas come Bahrain. Fingers crossed we do. That'll be nice to see.
I hope so, and I want Fittipaldi to come in. Obviously, that's not. I don't think we've seen a decision on that yet. There's been a little bit of talk, but it's either Piastri or Fittipaldi. It has to be.
Well, so, I mean, I was reading an article today, and so
can't be the Hulk. No, the Hulk can't come back.
Well, there's a potential that he could do. To be fair, there's a couple of drivers actually that there's actually a solid case for. One of them actually being Colin Herta, who is an IndyCar driver racing for Andretti. Oh, yeah. And so the thesis is potentially Andretti plows a little bit of money into Haas. By doing so, then transfer over Colin Herta, who is currently the leader in IndyCar, apparently. I don't know this. I don't watch IndyCar. But from what I've read, that's the case. And so it brings an American driver to an American team and hopefully restores balance to the world in terms of Haas being an American team. It's a possibility. It's unlikely.
You could see it happening, couldn't you? But you could see it happening. I think it's going to be Fittipaldi. It has to be. I really think it will be.
Other candidates, though, we've also got Antonio Giovinazzi.
Forgot about him. What about Grosjean? Where's he gone? Is he still in Indy?
Grosjean's in Indy. I doubt Grosjean will come back. I don't think he's fast enough, really. Doesn't really add anything to that team. But Antonio Giovinazzi has had the most recent, F1 experience. Obviously, raced all throughout last year. He's a safe bet. He's not the quickest driver, but he is on Ferrari's payroll. But he's currently racing in Formula E, and so it's unlikely that they'd be able to sever his contract with that in order to allow him to race.
You'd be very surprised. I don't think we're going to see Giovinazzi come back anyway. I mean, he had I don't think he was terrible. He was, and he's an Italian driver, which is always huge in Formula One.
Yeah.
But no, I don't see him coming back.
No, I'd be very surprised. But like you said, other drivers, Oscar Piastri, he would be the most logical step in terms of talent. Obviously, winning F2
he was a Renault driver, wasn't he?
He was a reserve driver for Alpine, and so again, it might be difficult to lure him away. But then again, Alpine might take the viewpoint of, well, he can go to Haas for a year, get some experience, and next year when potentially Fernando retires, if he does next year or the year after, stands him in good stead rather than being on the sidelines. He's got racing experience in Formula One. Then they might take that viewpoint. Who knows? Because they're not really in direct competition with Haas. Well, they might be by the end of the season if the reliability issues don't get any better. But I
just don't get Haas. I really don't. I mean, Gene Haas must be like in tears every single day he wakes up, wondering what the hell's going on, because he clearly loves Formula One, because he wouldn't have a team in it anymore. He's obviously spent so much money to have a back running team for quite a while now.
Yeah,
I feel so sorry for him. they're so lucky to have Mick in there. That's the only thing.
Well, this is it. It's similar to the comments that Toto made last week in terms of Andretti wanting to join the sport, saying, you need $1 billion if you want to join the club. And I think the reality is that is the case. If you've not got an excessive amount of funding, it's just not possible. You can't be reliant on sponsorship being your entire the entire value of the team. Mercedes were able to prop that team. If they had no sponsors, they would quite easily be able to fund that team year in, year out. Whereas Haas, Gene didn't want to plough money into it originally, and so was extremely reliant on sponsorship as well as pay drivers.
Yeah.
And so I think that has been to the detriment, and hopefully he's learned from that, maybe getting the huge influx of cash doesn't necessarily reap any rewards, just prolongs the inevitable of being sat at the back.
True, yeah. I mean, it's probably going to be a back runner again anyway, this team. So whoever comes in is going to have to know that and deal with it. But I guess for people like Piastri and all that, it would be a real opportunity to get into a Formula One car, which is still faster. Just get experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think experience is all you can garner from a Haas team at the moment, to be honest. I don't know whether you can get much more, really.
And I think this is their last year. I think this will be their last year in Formula One.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Too much money to be back running all the time. And there's no history. I mean, Williams have got history.
Yeah, you're right. You never know, though. I mean, we could see them at Bahrain and the tables could turn. Haas could be at the top of the timing sheets. They've got Oscar Piastri there and he's leading the way.
Let's not get too excited.
Not get too excited. But I mean, if you look at the difference in lap times, I mean...
We haven't even actually talked about their car in testing, to be honest. We've talked about the drivers, but the car actually wasn't that awful. I mean, it's a step in the right direction for them. They obviously didn't get much lap in. They didn't get any much lap. They didn't even make English. But yeah, that's not the best car, but it wasn't awful. They don't have too many issues to sort out. It's just really slow.
Yeah, they're 1.5 seconds off the pace of Mercedes,
which is awful, really, isn't it?
It's not great, but it doesn't really mean anything. They've not had the laps to be able to get in these fast runs. I think they're more kind of gathering data. Data gathering is the primary focus of initial testing. Well, it's not even testing really; it's a shakedown. That's what it was. That was what it was marketed as. And so I think we'll get a clear indication from Bahrain as to exactly where the teams are going to be and whether they've managed to make progress. I mean, we'll have direct comparison. If Haas and Alfa Romeo are at the bottom of the timing sheets as well as at the bottom of the number of laps next week, I think we'll be able to say quite unequivocally they are going to be at the back of the grid. But we don't know.
More than 1.5 seconds off the top runner, actually, isn't it? Lewis was a 1:19. It's nearly 2 seconds.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, Christ, yeah.
That's more than 2 seconds.
Terrible car. Awful.
Good. Yeah, no, actually, that's just the worst we've faced. The worst I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Alfa Romeo was even worse. They were nearly 3 seconds off, so it could be worse. There's always somebody. The thing is, somebody's always got to be at the back. And if you look at all the teams that are currently in F1, Haas is most likely to be the team at the back, no matter how much money and time they invest into it. You've just got 9 other teams with more resources, more history, more knowledge. Better drivers. Somebody has to be at the back of that grid every year, and it's not undoubtedly likely to be Haas, unless you've got more resources than the others, which they won't, unless they can get some ridiculous sponsorship. But who's going to want to sponsor them if they're already at the back of the grid? It's a catch-22. So you might be right. This might be the last.
I'm fed up of even talking about Haas. It's just such a.
It just provides so much content.
It is. The content's fantastic. You kind of got to hope that their Instagram manager's going to put out some absolute bangers this year after each race.
Hopefully,
just mug themselves off because we can't do much else.
I'm just praying for a new Haas livery for the next Bahrain test. I think they can go in any direction. They've got no title sponsor. Just have at it. Make the best looking car on the grid because at least then they'll get some airtime.
Can you imagine a NASA Haas car? How cool would that look?
That would look good.
That space.
Even just an American themed car. I mean, come on. They should be proud of.
Afford it though. Who in America is going to want a Formula One team? Because there's not really much American heritage in Formula One.
Well, I mean, they've got 2 races this year, and so they're marketing it quite heavily. You'd think that Haas want to be centre stage for those races, and if they put a big American flag on the car, then you know what the Yanks are like. that's going to be their favorite car on the grid.
We'll just get a big bald eagle on the side.
Yeah,
we'll leave it there. We leave it there. Just turn it into an eagle, and but maybe get the American driver in. Yeah, exactly. I really do think this will be their last year in Formula One, to at least have a good time.
Yeah, let's hope so. Anyway, I mean, not that it's the last year, but have some fun.
The last video of the year that Formula One put out on their YouTube channel is always that they do the Secret Santa. That's like one of the last things of the year. When they get to the Haas drivers, they go, no. it's just that nobody cares. Like, this shouldn't be there. They're so out of their place. Just go. Maybe Formula 2 is the place for Haas. I don't know. Have they got a car in Formula 2?
They don't know, but that's actually quite a good suggestion. Actually, Formula 2 might be better suited to their budgetary.
Well, they'll be listening to this as well, and Gene Haas is probably listening. So
he's definitely
another message to them.
All the team bosses listen to this podcast week in, week out. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Go back to Formula 2, Gene, and see if you can get a winner there, and then come back to Formula 1 when you've got a bit of history in the sport.
I mean, I wonder what might be interesting is, like you said, if it is a case that this is their last season, whether Andretti might end up buying Haas rather than waiting for the 2024 season, like they're proposing to. It's a much simpler way in. They've got the infrastructure there. They've got the personnel. It's a much simpler adoption to creating an entirely new team.
It has to be a big money man, doesn't it? It's going to have to be another big daddy coming into the sport with loads of money. You're going to have to buy out the team.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll get kicked off. Maybe the FIA just go, yeah, you're not fast enough. You're dangerous to the other drivers because you're so slow. Like, the amount of mistakes that we saw from both the Haas drivers last year that were stopping people's laps and getting in the way, especially Mazepin.
Mazepin, yeah. I mean, it's a much safer series with Mazepin no longer in it.
He had no idea what he was doing.
No. I mean, was there a single qualifying where he didn't end up
getting in the way?
Like, I'm sure he was
he was
like stone cold last every single race,
other than the ones where there might have been a breakdown or something and didn't actually finish a lap.
But even in qualifying, I'm pretty sure he was stone cold last every single week. Which clearly, I mean, he can't be too frustrated by the fact that he's been dropped because he's not there. If he'd beaten Mick even once, maybe there'd be a shred of evidence to suggest that maybe he's got a bit of talent or enough talent to kind of reside in F1. But he just didn't show that for me.
Well, we've got the next part, but the next kind of like subject we were going to talk about is, I don't know if you want to do this now, but the Drive to Survive season 4. Obviously, I can't wait for this.
Yeah.
But they're going to make a whole episode just on Haas.
I think I mean,
they have to.
What are they going to show though? Just Mazepin spinning around and Schumacher winning off the back.
It'd be a huge montage of Mazepin in the gravel, hitting walls. they could talk about so much. I mean, what's the geezer that runs the team at the moment? The one that's always there. He makes me laugh quite a bit.
Gene Haas. No. Gunther Steiner.
Yeah, that guy. I actually quite like him. I think he's funny.
Yeah.
But he's the last 3 or 4 years of Drive to Survive, 3 years now.
He's been solely focused around Gunther Steiner, yeah.
It's only been on him, but he's always so aggressive and he shouts to the driver, goes, you fuck off, and all this, and it's like he's so aggressive. What the hell are we going to see from him this time? It's going to be hilarious.
You look like a fucking bunch of vankers.
We're going to get some real content out of him this year.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We've been moving on to that topic. I mean, I'm quite looking forward to Drive to Survive. I love the fact that it comes out the week before F1 because it just gets you so excited for the season to begin, and it brings people into the sport that necessarily didn't want to devote the time to a full season in order to kind of understand what's going on. It's a really good way of being able to catch up.
It's a great catch up,
it's a good way to understand the dynamics, where teams should be, where drivers should be, and kind of be able to get into the sport a lot easier than it would be.
It's
to
Netflix
kind of
original, isn't it? So it's run by Netflix.
Yeah.
So they paid for this whole series to go ahead. I mean, they must be laughing for this last year. The content that they've got now for all of the last race and things like that, it's going to be such a good watch. And people coming into the sport and starting with that, it's always going to be like, number one for a week on Netflix. So people are going to see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that I wanted to discuss was the fact that I'm pretty certain at the start of last season, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen both declined to be featured within the series.
Oh, really?
Of all the seasons for them not to be included. I'm almost certain that they've asked to be...
Did that go ahead?
As far as I'm aware, I've not read anything otherwise.
Oh, for God's sake.
Because, I mean, the background content on that season would have been phenomenal. I mean, that's one of the best F1 seasons we've had in the last 40
you would
years.
have seen, surely.
Maybe they...
I mean, you'd think they wouldn't have slept and stuff. Like, I couldn't have dealt with that pressure.
The only way that I can imagine Netflix have got around that is maybe by documenting Mercedes and Red Bull, but maybe not necessarily documenting Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen in particular. Or maybe it's just that they've declined to be interviewed. But I don't understand why. I mean, it's such a good thing for the sport. They're bringing awareness to the sport. Lewis Hamilton with his...
a dick move. It's a horrible move for Formula One because you're the top two drivers. Everyone wants to watch you.
I'm surprised Liberty Media didn't come out and say, look, you're obliged to do this under your F1 contract.
Yeah, just say no one cares. We're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, because
it's so true.
I mean, it's only beneficial to them and F1. I mean, Lewis Hamilton loves to kind of give his opinions on veganism and pollution and all of this. And, for the very few people that haven't heard of Lewis Hamilton, most likely will be watching Drive to Survive, and he gets to have his voice out there. And so
people haven't heard of Lewis Hamilton.
There are some out there.
There's no way. I mean, you'd have to be like 90 years old in your deathbed, never watch TV in your life, to not know who Lewis Hamilton is.
Well, then again, I suppose those people aren't going to be watching Drive to Survive, are they?
Yeah, well, you never know. Maybe they're tuning in. They're waiting for it.
Yeah, maybe so. Me and my nan loves it.
My gran loves it. She comes to the races. She went to Abu Dhabi with us.
Yeah.
She was there. She probably couldn't hear it.
But I mean, other things as well that I quite like to see from Drive to Survive would be the Ferrari-McLaren battle. Because, I mean, as a side note, that was fairly intense throughout the year. I mean, obviously, McLaren finished third the season before. Pipping Ferrari. Obviously, Ferrari had one of their worst seasons in decades. But that was a fairly closely fought battle. And the fact that, we had the Ricciardo and Norris first and second in Monza, I can't wait for that episode.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of the midfield battles anyway, because that's kind of the whole point in the series, is that you see the behind the scenes of every team.
Yeah.
Not just the top teams. In fact, I think the last Drive to Survive, there wasn't really too much on the top teams. It was more about how much everyone else was struggling.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first season was primarily focused on Haas and Renault, I think, wasn't it?
Well, that's literally what I mean with saying about Gunter Steiner. How much you saw him was kind of unbelievable. It was like a Netflix series about him.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was great PR for Haas. Again, going back into Haas, we'll try and avoid that. But I think that Ferrari-McLaren fight will be good, and I can't wait to see the behind the scenes of the Monza first and second come in, because McLaren were the only team last season to come first and second.
See it.
Yeah,
it's just so fun to watch. I mean, I'm probably going to binge it. I might even take a day off work to watch the whole thing.
Maybe we'll do a podcast of a review of the Drive to Survive season 4.
Are we saving it until then? We could watch that before qualifying.
Potentially, we're going to have so much to talk about next week and the week after.
I don't know if I can hold on.
Boundless content.
Was it come out on Friday?
The 11th of March, which will be, I think it's Friday.
Should be Friday, right? It's got to be. It's always Fridays.
Friday the 11th of March. So,
I've got the week off. I actually do have the week off, so I can watch that.
Excellent. You got the week off?
Well, other than tomorrow, I'm going. I couldn't get tomorrow because someone else was already off, but I've got most of the week off.
Yeah, lucky boy. Anyway, we'll digress. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about then was some of the drivers to look out for this year. We've got a couple of. We've got a couple. We probably will have a couple of rookies this year. If
we do.
Pietro Fittipaldi comes in, we've also got Juan Yuzo, racing for Alfa Romeo.
Pronunciation.
Got it in there perfectly. Those two drivers themselves, not particularly exciting. But like you were mentioning before with McLaren, I think Daniel Ricciardo's season is going to be under scrutiny this year. I mean, he's got to perform. I mean, he's already come out and said that the car is, like you said, I don't know whether this was verbatim, perfect. So he's got no excuse then this year. If he loves it, surely he should be able to. He should be competing against Norris week in, week out, because Norris seems to get the upper hand on him, at least in qualifying last year.
Well, Danny Rick's one of the only people I'll forgive if he has a bad season, because you just get so much good content out of him through the season. Just the interviews are enough for me. He's just such a nice guy, such a funny guy.
He's just always smiling, and he just loves to be in Formula One. which wouldn't everybody?
He's gone viral in the last week, isn't he? That video of him watching Seb go out of the pits. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've not seen it, no.
It's quite funny. I mean, he's just he's talking his Italian to all the people walking past him below on the grid. And Seb obviously goes out and just goes, "Oh, that's my friend Sebastian Vettel. He is my friend." It's just the way he says it. You have to listen to it. It's quite funny.
I'll have to watch it.
Danny's funny.
Yeah, other drivers to look out for. I think again, this is going to be a crucial year for Charles Leclerc.
Ferrari boys, massive year for them.
Yeah, I think both of them. To be honest, it'd be interesting to see how Sainz, kind of, if Ferrari do have the fastest car, to see if Sainz can, handle the pressure being, with the Tifosi, whether he can outperform Charles Leclerc again this year. Whether Charles Leclerc
you really called it, haven't
you?
You said Sainz for title.
I did. I'm standing by it thus far, tentatively. I mean, ideally, I'd love Lando Norris to win the championship with McLaren. That would be. I might even put a bet on that because I bet the odds are astronomical. But who knows? It could happen.
Have I said who I think yet? I don't know.
No, you neglect to comment. So come on, give us your 2022 championship.
I'm going
leader.
Big George.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Big George because I love George. I want him to beat Lewis because I think, I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I think Lewis's time's actually coming towards an end in Formula One now. There's too much talk about him after the last season. And he just, when he disappeared for like 3 months, didn't post anything. Not 3 months, but he's not posted anything for a long time. Comes back and I was like, oh, the King's back. Come on, Lewis.
Strong words there from you, Brad. It's not like you to suggest that Lewis Hamilton would be beaten by his teammate. I mean, I'd love to see it. I mean, it's a win-win for the UK. I mean, it's a British driver either way if Mercedes wins. I mean, it's nice to have an all-British team. I mean, they've
Mr.
got such a good
Saturday.
lineup. Mr. Saturday, yeah. But, I mean, Lewis Hamilton is the most successful qualifying driver of all time. And so...
Yeah, but it's George.
Yeah. I can't wait. I mean, it's going to be so good to see who comes out on top. I mean, there's just so many unknowns. But George is definitely a driver to look out for this season.
Massively.
If for some reason you are listening to this and you're not particularly engrossed in Formula One, you're not quite aware of what's been going on for the past few years. I mean, George Russell is. He's been a Mercedes Academy driver for a while now. He's been with Williams at the back of the grid, dwindling off the back for the last 3 years. However, manages to pull out performances that are well above and beyond the capabilities of the car. And so Mercedes now picked him up to be Lewis Hamilton's teammate.
Yep.
And pretty much everybody in the F1 sphere rates George as one of the best drivers for the last few decades. Yeah, he is most likely to be the next Lewis Hamilton. But that remains to be seen. We've not had any physical evidence that he's faster than Lewis Hamilton as of yet. I mean, he did get the second fastest time in testing last week, just narrowly being beaten, I should say, by Lewis Hamilton. But he's definitely a driver to watch this season.
Yeah. Well, I think you could say everyone's good to look out for this season, but I think we've covered the top ones. Guan Zhou, do you think maybe look out for him? Probably can't look out for him. You won't see any of him on the TV.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I mean, I don't think he's going to be able to do much. I think it's going to be a learning experience. I think similar to Schumacher's year last year.
He shouldn't even be there, should he? Piastri should have got on that seat. And
yeah, I mean, we discussed that last week in terms.
Yeah, we did. I'm not even going to go back into it. But it's annoying.
Yeah, Guan Yu Zhou. I don't know. I don't know enough about Guan Yu Zhou. I don't know what his abilities is like. You never know. Some drivers do just naturally progress into Formula One and find that that's their series that they perform best at. It does happen, but it remains to be seen. I think he's got a lot to prove. I think he'll get a good couple of years out of that seat before, if he doesn't perform particularly well, until they get a bit fed up.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
But we'll see. I mean, trying to think of anybody else that's on the grid to look. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how Alex Albon performs this year. Surely he's gonna want to stand out because he wants Red Bull to pick him back up, essentially. Because I can't see Checo being in that Red Bull seat for that much longer. I can't really see him, to be fair, being in that seat past this year.
Really?
Yeah.
What, Checo?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I think he's the best second seat driver at Red Bull we've had in years. He's the only one that can actually cope with what Max puts out.
Can he though?
I think he's done a pretty good job because when you look at like the last two drivers that have been in there, it's just constant talk about how bad they were.
Yeah,
you don't hear that with Checo
I
because he
mean,
actually puts in really good
he
performances.
is a solid driver, but I think Red Bull aren't going to be content. If Max does perform and they have got the car, they're not going to be content with just winning the drivers'
Do you think they'll
championship.
keep looking for like the next big?
Well,
Verstappen?
they need a second teammate like Bottas that is able to get that second place finish to secure the constructors' championship. I think that's what Red Bull need to be doing now. Checo is fine in terms of helping Max when he needs it. He was
Yeah,
last year, but he's not getting the
he's not
points
a
for the
title
team, and
challenger.
so that's where the money is at the end of the day. And Formula One's a business. The teams want the biggest prize fund in order to be able to create the most amount of profit from the overall marketing adventure that is Formula One. And so I think that they'll look to replace Checo at the end of this season. I think they've got so many drivers in their young drivers academy that I don't know. I don't think they've got the time to wait, really, have they?
I don't really know enough about the drivers in the academy now. I mean, obviously they got the sister team. They're not going to take Yuki. That would be mental. I don't think Pierre will go back there because he's actually happy at AlphaTauri and he performs decently there. I don't think Albon will go back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't see anything unless one of these out of contract drivers just decide that it's time for them to really test themselves. But then they're all old.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a big shake-up at the end of this season with the silly season driver market. I think Yuki Tsunoda won't be in that unless he performs outstandingly this season. I can't see him
We've
being in
just
that.
said half the grid are going to leave.
Well,
So Vettel, I can't see him go much longer. I can't see Hamilton go much longer. Alonso probably won't go much longer.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
It's a huge shake-up, isn't there? It's
Yeah,
coming.
I think we could see. I mean, this year is probably the best year to win the Formula 2 championship.
Oh, massive year. And I can't wait. I'm going to watch Formula 2 because I think when we watched it in Abu Dhabi, it was so interesting just
Yeah.
to I mean, I can't say it's interesting just to watch the crashes, but it was just good racing.
The purest
But
fans here.
there's literally an esports driver in the lineup for Formula 2. Can you imagine if he gets to Formula 1? It'd just be incredible.
Yeah, I mean,
He's got no money behind him. Maybe he does. I don't know much about his parents, but
it
you know,
changes
he's
the
come
road.
through
It
the
changes the
internet.
roadmap to Formula One, doesn't it? Then
It does,
there's
yeah.
not a
It's
case
talent
of
again.
yeah, but it doesn't. There's no case of you need to have the money to start off karting and then go into Formula 4, Formula 3. Costing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. You can spend I don't know, invest £10,000 in a top rate simulator that's going to give you the most accurate representation of what a car is. And progress that way, and I think it's useful for teams to be able to use those channels because I imagine there's a lot of drivers out there that didn't have the money to get into karting and the Formula Series, but are extremely good at esports. I mean, you'll probably know more than I do on
Yeah,
that
obviously I
front.
know a lot about esports because I'm a bit of a gamer. But I watched a lot of the races with esports last year, and it's kind of like the precision that they've got. Even though it is a game, it's perfect. Every single lap, they're all perfect. So they've got so much experience of driving perfectly. And like the two drivers that have come out of it, which I can't remember the other guy's name, but obviously got Chem now. Um, if he can do that in the real car, and he's so used to doing it so perfectly, surely he's going to outperform most of the Formula 2 grid, which he's already done in GT3 cars.
Yeah, well, GT3 is Formula 2 is quite a big step up from GT3, but
Yeah, of course. Same
interesting. Yeah,
content though.
I
Still
mean,
driving a car.
yeah, no, you're right. I think it would be interesting to see what happens with him this season. You have to keep me updated as to how he's doing because it'd be interesting if that's a viable option for teams to look down in terms of bringing new
I will
drivers into
give
the
a
sport.
weekly update.
A weekly
Every
update.
podcast.
Yeah,
A little
we'll do
5 minute
Brad's
section.
5-minute Formula 2 section.
All right, I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, do it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that we could cover this week. Obviously, we've not really had much. Well, we've had no on-track action with there not being any testing
Not
this week. But
no.
next week we've got the final test in Bahrain, which is the host of the first Formula One race of the season for 2022. And so we get to kind of actually see what cars are going to be turning up because, I mean, they're not going to bring an entirely new car to the race after doing the pre-season testing the week before, and so we'll get a real accurate representation of where teams stand. And so we will do another podcast as to our final thoughts on teams, where they stand. We'll nail down our championship winner, and we'll put a bet on next week. But we'll go through that. We'll go through Drive to Survive maybe next week, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for every podcast now. I'm actually enjoying this a lot. So I've kind of actually forgotten about football. I'd not even really been bothered. I'm so invested in Formula One that's not even started yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic season. So, I mean, if you are listening to us for the first time, make sure that you tune in each week. Like I said, we'll try and get weekly podcasts out, at least at the end of each race weekend. Go through our thoughts. If you don't like what we say, tough. We said we were going to be controversial at the introduction. But yeah, keep your ears out. Let us know if you're listening, and we'll speak to you. We'll see you again in the next one.
Yeah, see you soon, guys.